The axe forgets, the tree remembers, and neither knows anything of the false dichotomy that binds them. Today we will be looking at Burning Spice Cookie to try and understand who he is and what truth he speaks. We will be looking at several ideas from Hinduist conceptions of time, 20th century philosophy of history, psychoanalysis, and the words of a certain cosmopolitan spiritualist. Let's walk this path together, and maybe, somewhere in the middle of all of this, we will remember why we knew this all along, that destruction awaits at the end of history. The Knot of Rebirth. Before we start our trip down memory lane, let me start you off with a quick welcome. If nobody has said this to you yet, take it from me. Welcome to the Kali Yuga, the last stage of our decaying world. It might appear obvious where the connection between Burning Spice Cookie and Hinduism lies, but still, it deserves further explanation. A good starting point is a simple iconographic approach, which would be comparing images of Hinduist gods, such as Shiva, to Burning Spice Cookie's design language. However, once it becomes mechanistic, that is, asking questions like, does he properly represent Shiva? Where is his representation incorrect? Is the point where taking a step back can be the healthier option? I'm trying to look at as few details of Burning Spice Cookie's design as necessary and possible in order to make my argument. And I'm starting with these peculiar red eyebrows, flames. Whatever they may be, they emerge where in his old form as Herald of History or Herald of Change, a diamond shape was etched onto his dough. You can call it a reach, I call it karma, specifically the knots of karma. These knots are the law of samsara, the continuous, endless, eternal cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. No soul ever truly dies, as their Atman, or essence, or soul endures, continuing in some other shape or form. This is the field we are dealing with. When we look at the backstory of Burning Spice Cookie's corruption, we need to consider that we are dealing with something that continues and folds back into itself. Narrative choices, villain psychology, etc. are all interesting on their own, but they might not be enough to understand that Burning Spice Cookie represents not just an endless time, but an endless time that just restarts again and again. If we look at it like this, then we are able to propose a possibly more interesting observation about Burning Spice Cookie than a simple iconographic comparison. He is not a representation of just one specific Hinduist god, whether that be Shiva, Vishnu, Brahman, or any of their so-called avatars like Kalki or Krishna, but an accumulation and culmination of certain ideas and iconic images that are a source of inspiration, but by flowing into his creation as a character, do something else entirely with them. To put it bluntly, Burning Spice Cookie is not just inspired by Shiva as the god of destruction, but also of Vishnu, but also the demon-killing goddess Kali, the Buddha, the great tempter Mara, and likely many, many more. As for the statue erected in his honor, it appears to be inspired by the line capital of Ashoka, a statue commissioned by the ancient emperor of the same name to commemorate the first sermon by the Buddha, as the Buddha himself is considered one of the avatars of Vishnu in certain Hindu traditions. What I conclude from this is that burning spice cookie embodies a specific principle. The past is not a rule book, which you subject yourself to like a student to a teacher, but a field of possibilities, a kind of symbolic space. Pre-configured symbols and narratives awaiting their rebirth. The past continues to exist virtually, as in the literal sense of the word, as good as. And the future is already being written and interacted with as if it were already here. Both past and future exist in the present. It is only fitting that his adversary is Golden Cheese Cookie with her virtual kingdom, and that their alternate costumes play with contemporary and cyberpunk visual language, an idea on the future from the past. Even if time itself, as a dimension in space-time, progresses linearly, it functions differently in the social world. It is not necessarily a tension, but a kind of spring of possibilities that Burning Spice Cookie instantiates. The end of history. Samsara, or the cyclic nature of birth, rebirth, and death, governed by the knots of karma, is not just about the essence of individuals persevering and continuing on in another form. There is another layer that seems particularly interesting for Burning Spice Cookie. In Hinduism, the world, the universe itself, is constantly reborn and reborn, enduring for billions of years, only to fade into nothing and emerge again. It all begins the state of harmony and only deteriorates from there. Morals, beauty, justice, they are all being eroded, replaced by chaos, and the world slowly dissolves into nothing, only for the cycle to begin again and again, and then again and again. These are the 4 world ages, an age of prosperity followed by 3 ages of decay, and each one just a little bit worse than the one that preceded it. Every new age is ushered in by the fiery dance of creation and destruction, performed by Nataraja, one of the avatars of Shiva. You have probably seen this sculpture, as it is the most famous icon of Hinduism globally, and famously displayed at the CERN. The 4th of these world ages, of these 4 so-called yugas, is the Kali Yuga, not named after the demon-killing goddess Kali, but after the demon Kali, the enemy of Kalki, one of the avatars of Vishnu. Only when Kali, the personification of the Kali Yuga and the ruler of it, is defeated, can the cycle of the world ages be ended and restart anew. It is therefore not an accident that the herald of change, or herald of history, and the beast of destruction borrows the iconography and overall visual language of Hinduism. In his function as herald of change, as we saw in his past before he corrupted, he presided over, simply watching, as history unfolded, civilizations springing to life, only to die, and the process to repeat over and over and over again, until he himself didn't even know whether it happened or whether it didn't. Notably, this endless cycle of creation and destruction makes it impossible to tell whether all of this happens within one cycle of the world ages or within several, and if it does happen within one cycle, we must imagine the sheer endlessness of that which happens over several. Even a herald of change comes to lose track of time, or so it appears. But is he truly a herald, or is he a king? And if he is a king, he is quite a castrated one, is he not? In the Freudian sense at least. Watching, perceiving, listening to reports, and with no means of enacting or acting proper. He is not so much spoken to as he is simply reported to. And immobile and incapable, this name of the herald is not a position, but simply an endurance. But simply a kind of endurance. He has watched history unfold countless times, again and again, only ever looking back at it. Whatever changes, he endures both its birth and its death and rebirth. And as that which comes before and persists afterwards, he does not need to have literally created anything. His position already makes him the ruler over whatever passes him by as so-called history. Burning Spice Cookie, per his function as herald of change or herald of history, has access to what is fundamentally a limitless stream of data and knowledge that he can draw only one meaningful conclusion from. All this change, yet never changing. It is a paradoxical statement at first, but the paradox can be resolved if we put what he says into different terms. All this continuous change in action, yet never differing in a way that matters. Even when a different trajectory appears visible, it is rendered meaningless by the tides of history itself. All change that occurs is restricted to itself, not enduring beyond itself. And even if it did, once the Kali Yuga comes to a close, it is all washed away again. The history Burning Spice Cookie is able to watch over, that he can only watch unfold, is defined by constant movement, by formal aberration, but essential indifference. It doesn't matter if a civilization grows in that desert, or in that valley, or that forest. It doesn't matter when, why, or how, or even for how long. In the end, they are all born. They live, they grow, they wither, and then they die. Over and over. And only two things endure: the pattern of creation and destruction itself, and Burning Spice Cookie. He endures it. Countless civilizations and histories later, he still endures. And endured he has, for he has gone mad and lost track of time, the only thing he has to concern himself with. The spice storm blows from paradise. His eyes are opened wide, his mouth stands open, and his wings are outstretched. The angel of history must look just so. His face is turned towards the past, where we see the appearance of a chain of events. He sees one single catastrophe, which unceasingly piles rubble on top of rubble and hurls it before his feet. He would like to pause for a moment so fair, to awaken the dead and to piece together what has been smashed. But a storm is blowing from paradise. It has caught itself up in his wings, and is so strong that the angel can no longer close them. The storm drives him irresistibly into the future, to which his back is turned, while the rubble heap before him grows sky high. That which we call progress is this storm. This is what German philosopher and historian Walter Benjamin wrote on history, inspired by a painting by Paul Klee, the Angelus Novus, the angel of history that is pushed out of paradise by the wind of change. He is immobilized by it, watching unfold before him what we call the future, and to him is the past, but unable to intervene. It is only after the fact that the atrocity that is history becomes apparent, because recognition requires memory and recollection, and only after we have realized and recognized the horror of the things that have transpired can we feel compelled to change them or to stop them, long after they have already happened. I am thinking of Burning Spice Cookie's immobility as the herald of change in these terms. A guardian who can only perceive. His function as guardian is enacted by seeing, not by acting. It is not his job to intervene, to speak, to bring prosperity, or ruin upon any civilization. His job is to observe, and in fulfilling his job, he comes to question the usefulness of his virtue, of his position proper. In no other backstory does it become clearer that the beast cookies are forced to endure a profound loneliness, not on the level of the individual, although that is also the case, but on the level of their position. One found, one ancient miracle, one herald, and so forth. It is a loneliness that is unbearable, not because the emotion itself is overwhelming, but because the beasts were forced to inhabit a position that makes easing their loneliness structurally impossible. And for Burning Spice Cookie, it must be even more so. Burning Spice and all the beasts exist laterally to cookie kind, in as far as they are cookies, but inhabit the positions of oracles, prophets, and I would argue, in the case of Burning Spice Cookie, even proper gods. Let us assume this position, or at least pretend to think from it. When you are faced with durations of time that reach billions of years, only to continue with another cycle of billions of years and so forth, what is left of time, or your perception of it? Where is the difference between a second and a year and a century? The difference between 1,000,000 years and 1,000,000,000 years is roughly 1,000,000,000 years. Of course, none of us have lived that long, at least not in our current reincarnations, to be able to judge what that feels like. But if it is truly an eternity, then it might just be one blip, where time stretches on so far that millions of years feel like just a moment ago. Or it might be so long that every second starts feeling longer than the one that came before it. Realizing the eternity of his role and function, I believe Burning Spice Cookie must, at least in part, have experienced both of it in some way. And so he resorts to destruction, a destruction that is not a failure to accept his position, and his boredom is not a mindset that can be explained away or healed with things like therapy. It is a simple dialectic. The eternity of time, of change but never changing, is eventually going to bore a being that has the ability to feel boredom. No matter how honorable his task may be, he is eventually going to feel bored because he has the ability to feel bored. So how does he resolve the tension? By extinguishing the wheel of history itself. This destruction is the reaction of frustration, but is also something else. A moment when a lever is pulled and a thought crosses his mind that changes everything, and he realizes this is not all there is to it. He felt himself bound by the rules governing his position, and by destroying, choosing to act, he has shown that his position is not set in stone, but a social contract, and any contract can be revoked. No matter the stage he stands on, the script he remembered, he has moved on from reciting his role to interpreting it and acting. He who has the power to oversee the ebb and flow of samsara and the world ages decides. He also has the power to destroy it, the only other move open to him. In an unending history, dying and being reborn without change, the only real difference is cessation or destruction. Instead of choosing what play gets performed next, he decides to burn down the entire theater building. This is why it makes sense for him to be in opposition with the cookie of abundance. Abundance is continuation without cessation. It is more and more without ever stopping. That is the flow of time he watched over. More history, more change, no end in sight. His fight with Golden Cheese Cookie is not just him wishing to take his soul gem back, since once he has it, he is as bored as ever. It is also a symbolic battle. If he can defeat Golden Cheese Cookie, he can achieve his goal and crumble the flow of time. Burning spice cookie is not the cookie of destruction as a force of nature, but of the ultimate catastrophe, the salted, scorched earth on which nothing can ever grow again. Not just any destruction, but total destruction, from which nothing can ever sprout. Tell me why I am bored. For this part of the video, we are going to take quite a detour, one that might not make any sense in hindsight, but that still might be valuable to understanding what we are dealing with. Primarily, we are trying to understand why Burning Spice Cookie seems so spurred on when he loses a battle, why he was seemingly happy when Golden Cheese Cookie escaped from his dungeon, and why he just crumbled Cilantro Cobra Cookie like that, just to fight Golden Cheese Cookie. And, primarily, we are looking at why his boredom is so unbearable that he chooses to destroy. His destruction is aimed to end history itself, as he himself stood outside of history, overseeing its futility and change without changing. But what is boredom in this context exactly? It is not a simple emotion born from a lack of entertainment, but a structural condition. In other words, it is a symptom of his position, a symptom that can only ever be eased temporarily, and whatever remedy was provided for it has now proven itself useless. As much as history is endless, so is the list of solutions to his boredom. Once one has been used, it must be crossed off that list. Disposing of another on whom to unload symptoms and dissatisfaction, a support and a neutral witness who does not blame her, as others had who had listened previously. Someone capable of understanding the truth in her words, and not rejecting her as insubstantial or a liar. When she finds the analyst, she is cured rapidly and makes the other a substitute for her symptoms. To put it bluntly and stop beating around the bush, Burning Spice Cookie is the eternal hysteric. Hysteria, the bird of paradise of illnesses, and the womb of psychoanalysis itself. Over its documented history of at least 4,000 years, no hysteric, be that woman or man, has had the same hysteria as another hysteric, an endless list of symptoms, impossibly long. Hysteria doesn't just invent psychoanalysis, it also forces psychoanalysis to reinvent itself in every therapy session, in every utterance, in every symptom. Hysteria, the wandering womb, is that which exists outside of time, linear time at the very least, unable to put itself back into that linear timeline. Hysteria is the body that speaks, through silence, language, and movement. Or, in the case of Burning Spice Cookie, destruction. Even if hysteria is no longer a so-called real diagnosis in the DSM-5, it continues to exist as a figure of thought and as the center of gravity of modern-day psychology and psychoanalysis, unable to rip itself free from the grasp of the wandering womb. It is the grip of Burning Spice Cookie's boredom. Boredom is not an observable or even rational thing, maybe not even a state of mind or any of the like, but it is symptom and origin of that symptom, all in one. It is simply that the hysterics discourse reveals the master's discourse's relations to jouissance, in the sense that in it knowledge occupies the place of jouissance. The subject himself, the hysteric, is alienated from the master signifier as he whom the signifier divides. He, in the masculine, represents the subject, he who refuses to make himself its body. People speak about somatic compliance with respect to hysterics, although the term is Freud's, Can't we see that this is very odd, and that it's more a question of the body's refusal? In following the effect of the master signifier, the hysteric is not a slave. Hysteria is the fact of language itself, and so Burning Spice Cookie's body speaks, and it produces one demand. Tell me why I am bored, Golden Cheese Cookie. This question lies at the heart of Burning Spice Cookie's destruction, and it is homologous to the question of the hysteric. Tell me who I am. This is the question that the hysteric poses to the master, demanding a certain answer. But ask yourself, if you asked someone else to answer this question of tell me who I am, would you be happy with the answer you receive? It is the question that's impossible to answer. Whatever answer the master provides, the hysteric will reject it, forcing the master to obsess over her, to produce meanings and answers that will never be enough, and in turn become the object of desire for the master. She unveiled his knowledge as incomplete, as undeserving of its claim to total absoluteness, and the master, entranced by this rebellious spirit, wishes to understand her, absorb her into himself, and consume her. The hysteric derives her jouissance, or enjoyment, from never achieving enjoyment, by pushing the final, total answer away. Tell me who I am is not a question as much as it is a demand for an answer, and as an answer that can never be formulated, it is the well from which enjoyment springs. It is the final fulfilling answer that would end her being as hysteric, and so it needs to be pushed away. Just like boredom can only be pushed away, but never quenched. When Golden Cheese Cookie runs from his dungeon, Burning Spice Cookie has simply found another reply to his demand that he can now reject. A solution in destruction may be provided, but only temporarily. Boredom will return and need to be eased again. Boredom is the illness, the symptom, and the source of Burning Spice Cookie's joy all the same, and so he only exposes the fragility of the master. Hysteria is the hysteric's reason for being, and boredom is what imbues Burning Spice Cookie's life with meaning. The hysteric wishes to be heard if the other wishes to be spoken to. It is not a fortuitous encounter, but rather performs a structural requirement. She demands being heard and requires the other's time to measure the desire of her word. Discourse, as opposed to the instance of the gaze, requires time to unfold. Time thus becomes an object. Why I have told any of this in such detail eludes even myself, but I wanted to show you something. Hysteria, often called the shimmering bird of paradise that gave birth to psychoanalysis, having prevailed for over 4,000 years, if not longer, and at the same time has never been the same, always changing, always different. It is in this moment of historical discontinuity where hysteria and Burning Spice Cookie meet. That which cannot be said, that which has no history, that which can only speak through the body. Because what is boredom truly, if not a symptom that can only be heard, only be observed, but never seen? And what is the cure, if not to fulfill a desire that can never be fulfilled? Memory and knowledge. History is the precondition of memory. Memory is the precondition of knowledge. Knowledge retroactively structures history. Shadow Milk Cookie as the fallen fount of knowledge, as the split half of the light of knowledge, is the direct opposite of Pure Vanilla Cookie, the inherited light of truth. And while he is not the protagonist, and maybe also not the hero, he is the central figure of Cookie Run Kingdom. the through line that has connected every story arc so far. Knowledge, truth, deceit are all big words. Not that they are difficult to understand, but impossible to grasp. And still, they are only one half of the equation, only partial. What is the precondition of knowing and understanding? Memory. And what is the precondition of remembering? The ability to know and think. Shadow Milk Cookie's virtues of knowledge and deceit are grand and philosophical, quite literally so even. But you cannot remove memory, and thus also history, from knowing, and vice versa. They are not separate aspects, inasmuch as they are two inseparable pairs. There is one last thinker I want to introduce here, Jiddu Krishnamurti, who places a lot of importance on this inseparability. At least, this is what we are going to conclude from him. Krishnamurti highlights the distinction between perceiving and seeing that becomes clearer in the following excerpt. We are asking, what is the quality of a mind that has come so far naturally without any effort? If you look at a tree or a cloud, the face of your wife or your husband or your neighbor, it is only out of silence that you can observe very clearly. You can only listen to when there is no self-projected noise, when you are chattering to yourself, comparing what is being said with what you already know. Then you are not listening. When you are observing with your eyes and all kinds of prejudices and knowledge are interfering, you are not really observing. So when you really observe and listen, you can only do so out of silence. Even if Krishnamurti urges us to see without recognizing, he is quietly saying, see and hear without remembering and understanding. Even in the kind of pure, experientiality laid out by Krishnamurti, memory and knowledge are linked. Sever them, and you are left with neither. But notice what Krishnamurti is actually getting at, that to truly see something, such as a tree, for what it truly is, we have to let go of memory, of knowledge, and ideas of the future. True seeing requires oblivion. History, knowledge, and ethics are not pure aspects of the human psyche. They structure the world around themselves. Knowledge creates division, history creates distinction, ethics creates conflict. Even if the narrative of Cookie Run Kingdom highlights Shadow Milk Cookie as Pure Vanilla Cookie's adversary, Burning Spice Cookie and Shadow Milk Cookie still see eye to eye. It is a funny coincidence that the quote finishes with the word silence, because it is perfectly possible for any one of us to look at this segment and relate it to Silent Salt Cookie, and they would be totally correct. Let us go even further. Burning Spice Cookie, Silent Salt Cookie, and Shadow Milk Cookie form a trifecta of history. Remembering, knowing, projecting, experiencing, understanding, narrating. 3 segments that require each other. It is easy to imagine an alternate universe where it is Burning Spice Cookie fighting Pure Vanilla Cookie, but it would most likely require a very different kind of story. By putting Burning Spice Cookie with Golden Cheese Cookie, a very specific and very different tension is highlighted. But it is definitely possible to imagine a different kind of configuration of beasts and ancients. Eternal Sugar versus Dark Cacao Cookie, Mystic Flower and Hollyberry Cookie, Silent Salt versus Golden Cheese Cookie, Shadow Milk versus White Lily Cookie, and, as I said, Burning Spice Cookie versus Pure Vanilla Cookie. This doesn't mean that the stories exist, but that they are theoretically possible, a speculative future from a potential past. Burning Spice Cookie has taught us to see the past, present, and future as a possibility space, not as a curriculum. Before we conclude, Here is one final question I want to ask that adds a layer that we previously ignored, because it is not abstract, but maybe it is one that is also meta-discursive. What we will look at now is also a reflection on history itself, or it is a question I'm asking, as much as a statement. Symbols are defined by their instability. The invocation of a symbol in general and of specific symbols changes something about the nature of the symbol itself. That was quite a mouthful, but I hope it will make sense once we look at one last figure from the broad archive of Hinduist traditions. One figure I really want to highlight. It is not an accident that Burning Spice Cookie carries an axe, and in his uncorrupted form, also a bow and an arrow. Burning Spice Cookie heavily borrows from Parashurama, a so-called Avesha Avatara, or temporary avatar of Vishnu, showing up at several points across several yugas as a kind of eternal force. Parashurama is depicted either with 4 arms, carrying an axe, Parashu, and bow and arrow, Sara and Dhanusha, or with 2 arms, only carrying the axe. At least iconographically, the 2 are linked. Parashurama appears in different contexts, and this is where an idea from Hinduism shows up, the belief in an eternal truth, which in itself is not so dissimilar from ideas like Platonic form, ideas of truth in Buddhism, or the Abrahamic religions like Christianity, and other mythic systems like the Greek and Old Norse pantheon. At the end of the Kali Yuga, when Kalki sets out to defeat the demon Kali, Kalki is taught by the guru Parashurama, or Rama with an axe. The Cookie Run Kingdom Phantom Wikia already highlights the importance of the axe, or Parashu of Burning Spice Cookie, but this is another link. Parashurama, as a guru or spiritual teacher, points towards Burning Spice Cookie's position as herald of change at a very specific crossroads. Parashurama is an immortal that appears at the end of the Kali Yuga, at the moment nearing dissolution and rebirth. It is only through him that Kalki subsequently comes to defeat Kali, ending the current cycle and starting a new one. It is the archetypal struggle of the teacher which makes the student, but it is the student who concludes the path laid out by the teacher by overcoming him. But what if there were a teacher and no student to teach? What if the teacher assumes the role of the student without inhabiting his position? The archetypal struggle of master and student, as old as pedagogy itself, finds a new instantiation in Burning Spice Cookie. And this, to me, is the very core of what I wanted to share with you today. Burning Spice Cookie, or all the beast cookies for that matter, cannot only be approached by how well they fit into neat little taxonomies of cultures and religions, but through play, by bringing together disparate strands of history. This is what Burning Spice Cookie instantiates, the present as the space where future and the past interact and converge, making space for possibilities in both directions. When archetypes, or even diagnostic categories like hysteria, are invoked through him, what those archetypes and symbols mean is changed through him. Burning Spice Cookie, being based on Parashurama, changes what Parashurama is and was and will be. Same with the hysteric, same with historiography, and same with time itself. Today, we only sparsely looked at the question of what happened to Burning Spice Cookie, and instead paid a lot of attention to the question of what kind of story is Burning Spice Cookie telling us. This is the power of speculation, in which both past and present coexist. When we look at a character like Timekeeper Cookie and the TBD, and then put them next to Burning Spice Cookie, we can ask, who has the stronger attack powers? Who has seen or endured more? But we can also ask, what does this teach us about the history of the world and the fate of the universe? It is the central question of all that breathes, dreams, hopes, loves, and mourns. It is a question that a game about tiny cookies can ask just as much as I am asking it to you. A question that does not ask for an answer, but only a listener. What does it mean to be alive? The answer lies in the whisper of the cookies, waiting for the ones who are willing to risk it all by listening. I am not saying that I have heard it, but I have heard as much. Burning Spice Cookie is a force of time that will swing its axe forever and ever. Time is just boredom, swallowing us whole for its entertainment. The axe forgets, the tree remembers, and neither knows they have altered the fate of the world.